This is Power Athlete Radio. With your hosts, Denny K, Professor Booty, and the Luke Summers. And now, toes forward, hips locked, shoulders set, and retract those scapulars. It's time for some knowledge bombs.
What's up, Power Athlete Nation? Welcome to episode 68 of Power Athlete Radio. And boy, do we have a good one. I know we've been bringing in some awesome guests lately. We posted some stuff on social media, just kind of highlighting who's been on the show. But today, we have Dr. Squat himself, Fred Hatfield, joining us. How you doing today, sir?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great. And as always, we got the Power Athlete coaches, John, Luke, and Tex. How's it going, guys?
What's going on, Benny?
What's happening?
How you doing, guys?
And just as a heads up, Callie is here too.
Okay. I didn't hear in the background in our little pre-show warm-up. Usually she's
well, you know, somebody has to work, Benny. So
yeah, that's true. I figured you we're behind there, just like ingrained in your computer, working hard.
Yeah, Callie's been answering emails.
I was out there for a week.
John and I have been in this Chinese finger trap thing for like an hour this morning so far, trying to figure it out. So
right.
It's pretty pertinent research to the training philosophy.
No, but this one's awesome. Every show is awesome, but before I kind of got into more strength and conditioning, and I did my time as a personal trainer, you're required to get specific trainers courses. All those other ones. I chose the ISSA, so I'm really curious to kind of ask some questions as far as like the whole strength curve and some of the 7 laws of training that Dr. Hatfield had come up with. So I'm fired up.
Well, I'm never not fired up, Benny.
And I also kind of overheard when John, when you and Dr. Hatfield that spoke, I was sitting right next to you, and I mean that whole conversation has sounded interesting. So, do you want to kind of lead us off?
Yeah, I'll kind of get it rolling a little bit. I reached out to Doc recently just because we had gotten done with this huge testing for Field Strong and Power Athlete, and I think we had anywhere from 300 to 400 different athletes go through our testing protocol. And those of you guys listening that did Field Strong and did the testing protocol know that we asked you to submit all your data. And as I started looking at the data, I realized I needed to reach out to people that were smarter than me, that were more educated and had a vaster knowledge. So I started looking back on the people that were influences, and this takes me back to over 20 some years to being a young kid training in George Zangus's garage, and him talking about this thing about bar acceleration, and you got to try to move the bar as fast as you can, and how it has carryover to sport. And he referenced Dr. Squat Fred Hatfield, who and George were friends, and those of you guys know I've talked about George before, but he invented the super suit and the wrap and the marathon wrap. And I think Doc was wearing one of George's suits when he squatted his big 1014. And so as I was going through this deal, I thought, who's better to reach out to and talk a little bit about some of our testing protocols, and more importantly, how to really classify and help athletes reach their goals than Doc. So I reached out, and we were able to have a really great conversation for an hour or an hour plus, and just got a lot of great information that really kind of helped me go in a different direction and create some better programming for our athletes. And the big thing that I really think that has been just a huge factor is that compensatory acceleration, and more importantly, explaining it to people. Because even though you explain the concept and hey, I want you to accelerate the bar through the full concentric range of motion, and as the mechanical advantage increases, you're able to keep ramping up that bar speed. I don't think that people really understand what that looks like, and more importantly, the speed at which they need to move. And if you go through Doc's book Power, he really goes through and has a great chart talking about, speed of these movements and what the ideal is. And if you go online and, look at some of the Verkhoshansky and Zatiskorsky work, they talk about 0.8 meters per second being, that ideal for speed. So, unless you have an iPhone or a way to kind of time it, it's difficult to quantify that. So Doc told me he had had a guy, I think it was a torquemeter or something that you guys had used back in the 80s. Well, we ended up purchasing a Tendo unit and, got a Tendo unit sent over and started playing with it on the bar and started timing all of our lifts to try to figure out exactly what 0.8 meters per second were, and the kind of intensity that you need to drive into the bar. And it's pretty interesting to know what somebody's 1RM is and start playing with the percentages and then start testing their speed on the bar. And what became very apparent is the people that have the best reversal speed. So if I can transition from my eccentric to isometric to concentric contraction, like in the squat, for example, the more violently I can create that transition, the greater speed I can generate. And so that became a big deal. And I want to ask him a couple more questions about reversal speed or that starting strength and how we can really attack that, because I really think that is that barrier between, people, everybody wants to move fast, but can you generate enough force? Is there enough stored force in the elasticity of the, of the tendons and muscles and whatnot to be able to make it happen? So, and then it's like, how do you build that? Is it, through plyometrics? Is it jumping? Is it, lighter weights, teaching people? Is it loading? I mean, it's, there's a million different variables. And as you go back and you start trying to arrange training and trying to figure out how to attack people's weaknesses, I think these all become, the questions that we ask, and more importantly, the little knobs that we try to turn up to make a great sounder or a better athlete. So
well, there you go, John. I mean, everything you just said, I was going to say so.
Well, that's what we talked, and I listened. I went back and listened to it.
That was a nice synopsis.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much the gist of our conversation. And I went home and I listened to it, and I thought, I'm like, hey, can I record this? Because I don't want to take notes. And I went back and listened, and it was, it was so enlightening to know that, hey, like this is, this is the right mindset. This is the good direction. But, I don't want to steal all Doc's thunder, but, part of that deal, and I think what we've really seen the difference between athletes is their ability to, with bar speed, like how they do things, how explosive they are, how fast they can move. And when we started watching a lot of videos of guys squatting, especially in benching and doing different movements, one thing that blew me away is there's no way to do a box jump or some form of jumping slow. There's no way to Olympic lift slow. And, the only, and if you move slow, you don't get the lift, you don't get up on the box. But with like the barbell movements, you can still do them slow and still execute the movement and finish the movement. And it really was one of those things. I took a step back and I realized, like, I don't think people take the same mindset when they go into, like a bench squat, deadlift, or more of those, let's say a linear type deal opposed from like an Olympic movement, take that same approach. And, that Tendo unit was huge for kind of teaching us, like, hey, this is how fast you need to be moving at all times, and this is where it becomes. So that was, it was a great conversation. It really got me thinking in a different way. So that's why selfishly, I got to talk to Doc, and then you guys were like, well, can we get him on the podcast? We don't want to talk to him. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure, and the more the merrier. So I'll let Doc talk. I'm probably talk too much.
Well, let's take it from the top.
Okay.
In all the world of sport, speed is king. Nothing is more important than speed. And nothing could be more true in regards to starting speed or starting strength, putting it another way. So let me give you an example of a couple of modes of movement. Let's say that you squat down with a bar on your back, and in order to squat down with the bar on your back, you've got to turn off some muscle fibers, turn off some motor units. That way, the bar becomes heavier than the amount of strength that you're putting out. So you're lowering the bar under control by turning off more and more motor units, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, what most guys do is they hit the bottom and they come out of the bottom and try to stand back up and slowly turn on more and more and more motor units to move the bar. That's what they do. And that's precisely what they should not do. What you have to do instead is when you hit the bottom, you want to hit the bottom relatively fast and come out of the hole relatively fast in order to establish some kind of a myotatic response in your muscles. And you turn on as many muscle fibers as you possibly can instantaneously, like a Titan rocket taking off. You don't try to gently ease your way into the movement. You turn everything you got on. Now, this takes training. It takes practice, and you can actually teach your muscle fibers to turn on more quickly by lowering the excitation threshold. And that's where that little mini gym comes into play that I told you about, John.
Yeah.
Basically, all it is a little arrangement of clutch plates attached to a bicycle chain, attached to a bar, which is suspended on this big metal frame. And so the harder you push against the bicycle chain with the bar, the tighter those clutch plates become, and so the harder it becomes to move. And it'll keep your speed at a constant rate. So, for example, if you turn the dial on that machine so that the clutch plates can only come so close together, you can make the machine a little bit faster, or you can make the machine a little bit slower. So whether you're pushing with 5 pounds or 500 pounds, this bar is going to move at the same rate of speed, depending upon how hard those clutch plates come together. So here we go then. We're going to set the clutch plate such that we can move that bar 2 feet per second. All right? Mm-hmm. So we push the bar as hard as we can, and on the dial, you see that you're generating, let's say, for example, 1,600 pounds of force. Well, now let's adjust the bar so that it moves it moves 5 feet per second. So the bar is now able to move very, very fast. And we get under the bar and we squat the bar and we push as hard as we can. And we don't even remotely come close to 1,600 pounds of force. You're only going to be able to exert 600 or 700 pounds of force. Why is that? And the answer lies in motor unit recruitment. It takes a good 3/4 of a second, as much as a full second, for the average person to turn on as many motor units as possible. And that's not acceptable in the world of sport, because in the world of sport, movements are over with in milliseconds. You swing a golf club, you punch somebody in front of you, you lift something, you hit a tennis ball with a racket, and so forth. You know that those movements are so amazingly fast that only a fraction of a second has passed during the conduct of that movement. So it doesn't do us any good to lift a heavy weight slow. We have got to move as much weight as we can in the twinkling of an eye. So we go back to that machine, and now over the course of 2 or 3 months of time, we gradually increase the speed of the bar, so that whereas we were once able to exert 1,600 pounds of force at a very slow speed, we can now exert 1,600 pounds of force at a very fast speed. That means we're getting more motor unit recruitment in a shorter period of time. And that is what sport is all about. And that is what I teach. I teach compensatory acceleration. You compensate for the improved leverage by accelerating the bar. Or if you can't accelerate it, you try to accelerate it by pushing as hard as you can every inch of the way. As leverage improves through a squat movement, for example, you should be able to move a house by the time you get near the top. And so what I want you to do is I want you to move that house. And that's only going to happen is if you're able to turn on all of your motor units as quickly as possible, surely inside of 3/4 of a second. Do you follow that?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we're totally on board. Doc, how long does it take to, like, let's say you take somebody comes to you and they've been, with that whole train slow, be slow, they've been just kind of grinding through, each lift looks kind of real slow and controlled. How long does it take an athlete when all of a sudden you bring them in and they got a fairly decent strength base to all of a sudden take it to where, they're able to actually use compensatory acceleration and get their muscles to turn on? I'm kind of a believer that if you've always trained in kind of a slow environment, that it's going to take you longer to be able to kind of change over the physiology and start becoming more dynamic in a way.
And to pile on that, what other contributing factors could there be, whether it's gender, chronological age,
training age,
and training age?
Yeah, hormones. I mean, there could be key factors.
Well, all of those factors come into play, of course. We all know that guys, for example, are able to generate greater force than girls. But the primary reason for that lies in the fact that guys typically have bigger muscles. So, you needn't go much farther than that. They have the same motor units. They have the same ability to turn on motor units. But when you have bigger ones and more of them, you're gonna move heavier weights and create greater speed. So, and then hormones, guys have testosterone, girls have very little testosterone. So guys recover faster from exercise, and the supercompensation principle becomes much more pronounced with guys because they are able to make their muscles much bigger than girls can make their muscles. With white muscle fiber, for example, that is the fast twitch fiber, you can get those fibers to get as much as 80 to 100% bigger than they ordinarily would be in their detrained state. But girls can't do that. Girls can't get their muscle fibers to grow that much simply because they lack their hormonal milieu. Now, there are several other factors as well. I mentioned the myotatic response. You can't go down and we're using a squat movement because the squat movement is very representative of almost all sport movements. For example, you rear back and you throw. Well, the rear back is like squatting down. Or your foot hits the takeoff board and your knee bends. That's like squatting down. And then, boom, you push off for the long jump. So squatting down with a bar on your shoulders is representative of most sports movements. And you've got to go down as quickly as you can in order to get that myotatic response, but not so quickly that you crumble yourself into the ground by going down too fast. It's got to be under control, so that when you hit that sweet spot right at the bottom, just below parallel, for example, you've got to be able to turn on everything you've got instantly. And that brings in the element of danger. Believe me when I tell you that is the single most prevalent source of injury in the world of powerlifting, coming off the chest in a bench press or coming out of the hole in the squat. Most lifters are not going to hurt themselves up near the top of the lift. They're going to hurt themselves coming out of the hole. And that's because you turn on so many motor units at once that they're not ready to handle that kind of stress, and they tear. So you've got to get yourself ready through proper training, proper periodization, getting all of the connective tissues and so forth strengthened around the joint and within the muscle itself so that you can withstand that kind of stress. That's where plyometric training comes in, for example. Slow and easy at first and gradually increasing in intensity so you can do depth jumps off of a higher box and so forth. But you can't do that at once. So to answer your question, you go into the gym and expect that you're going to be able to utilize compensatory acceleration in all of its glory to improve your lifting ability. You've got another thing coming. It's going to take you months. And I'm talking about doing it in such a way where it's going to be safe to do and where it's going to optimize your ability to lift that heavier weight. It takes months. With me, it took a lifetime.
So are you still using it, Doc?
At 70 something, no, I don't. I honestly don't. I get out of my chair very slowly these days.
When you get behind the wheel, when I drive places, I like to use compensatory acceleration.
Oh, God.
I literally ram my foot in the gas.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Well, that's
I don't use brakes.
A really good example, John. When you press on the gas as hard as you can, put the pedal to the metal, you're going to experience compensatory acceleration because the engine is getting greater and greater amounts of gas. But if you press on the pedal slowly and over the course of a minute's worth of time, you gradually bring the pedal down to the metal, you're not going to accelerate. You're going to accelerate, but you're not going to accelerate the way you have to in a world of sport. It's always pedal to the metal.
The biggest factor, what I've seen is really kind of we watched today with two of the girls that we were working with from the LFL, Chelsea and Amanda. It's that ability to transition from that eccentric to concentric, and that all of a sudden that explosion out of the hole. And earlier in the week they squatted with just a barbell, and then today we used the safety squat bar, and it was pretty amazing how much different, or how they could actually catch a bounce, and they were much faster in the reversal strength of their starting strength with a bar the minute we put the safety squat bar, and they had their hands out in front of them and not into that position where you can almost leverage torque against your back by pulling on the bar or pushing on it or doing different deals. It was pretty interesting to see how much more lax and how they couldn't generate the same force out of the hole. So just looking for different ways to do it. If you're pretty strong, but it's really that transition out of the hole, how does an athlete really attack that? Is it plyos? Is it pauses? Is it box squats? I mean, what's the really attack or the fix for creating a reversal in that starting strength?
I'm not a big believer in box squats. I've seen way too many athletes hurt themselves horribly with box squats. I could give you example after example. And everybody says, well, you got to do them right. Well, I don't want to do them at all if they're that damn dangerous. And I abandoned box squats very early in my career because I found that I was able to generate greater force out of the hole with compensatory acceleration and other techniques. So what's the point of using a technique of training that doesn't give me maximum returns? So I abandoned it as being superfluous. Now, as far as the best training method that I have ever come across is that mini gym. I am so surprised that other guys have not picked up on this, because learning how to turn on optimum or maximum number of motor units is a learned response. It's not something that you can automatically do. It just doesn't happen. You have to learn how to do it by lowering excitation thresholds in those harder to reach white muscle fiber motor units. A motor unit is comprised of anywhere from 1 or 2 to as many as 90 or 100 individual muscle cells. The ones with a low number of motor units, low number of muscle fibers, those are the motor units that are related to the red slow twitch muscle fibers for endurance. And you know that you cannot generate a whole lot of force with red muscle fiber, but you can make them contract many, many times longer than a white muscle fiber can, which is highly fatigable. So the muscle fibers that are associated with motor units with high number of muscle fibers, they are the white muscle fibers. So when you turn on one of those suckers, you're going to blast off because you have so many muscle fibers working for you all at once. Because you ever hear of the all or none theory? The all or none theory states that all of the muscle fibers and all of the individual actin and myosin myofilaments within each muscle fiber are going to contract fully, or they're not going to contract at all. So that all or none theory works in great favor for power athletes if they learn how to use it. Now, the chemoelectrical impulse that goes down into that motor unit to turn it on, that can be coaxed to become lower and lower so that you can get it turned on much more quickly. That's the key that mini gym training will give a person, is that you can train those motor units to turn on sooner and get greater explosiveness.
So Doc, that kind of goes into a question that Text had sent me earlier, and he was referring to your starting strength, the Q angle. If that's your ability to turn on as many motor units as possible instantaneously, then explosive strength is your ability to leave them turned on.
That's
right?
correct.
The two are not the same.
They are not the same.
Yeah, you kind of refer to that as speed strength.
Yeah.
And we often reference a replication of speed for field sport athletes. So how would you approach training speed strength with a field sport athlete where their end goal would be to kind of be in this turned on state the whole 60 minutes of the game?
Yeah, therein lay the rub. It's a difficult thing to do. But when you find an athlete who is able to maintain focus, get himself into that so-called zone, they're going to be able to do amazing things, remarkable things. But you've got to stay focused. You've all seen athletes. You probably have experienced it yourself, where on a particular series of plays or a particular movement or whatever, golf course, hitting a drive, everything seemed to come together, and it was so effortless, and you had a peak performance. Well, that's because there were no intervening variables coming to bear on your concentration. You turned off all five senses, turned them off, and you got into the now. You got into the moment, where there is no past and there is no future. There is only now, and that is the zone. That's called the zone, being in the now or in the present moment. And it's a state of higher consciousness that allows you to do that. That's where you have to go. That's where you have to be.
So, Dr. Hatfield, I thought of that question just kind of listening into your and John's conversation from the other week. And part of that kind of came from the speed strength. And then how would you kind of approach a team in training that zone with a barbell on your back? So I know we talk about compensatory acceleration and moving the bar as fast as possible, but how would you take that idea to a group setting?
The only way that I've ever been able to do this is if you have a couple or three or four athletes hanging around, waiting for their turn at the bar or whatever, and instructing the person under the bar or under the mini gym machine and watching that needle. You watch that needle on a mini gym, you can see the needle rise and get higher and higher over the course of the lift. That's not good. I want to bury that needle right out of the hole at 1,600 pounds and leave it there or higher all the way through the lift. And so this kind of visual feedback that the athletes get, even if they're just standing around watching, they are able to relate to that. So to me, the best teaching technique or method is to give them feedback. And I like that visual feedback. Once you get underneath the bar, you're going to get tactile feedback. And eventually, once you get good at it and you're able to do it at will, you no longer have to think about it. You go into the zone where there is no senses. There are no senses to take up any section of your thinking process. And you stop thinking altogether and rely upon technique. That technique is so ingrained that it just happens. That's when you get the peak performance. When you no longer have to think about anything but pure movement. You go down and you come up or whatever. And so the feedback to me is what's important. I'm a big believer in feedback. If it's, at first it has to be verbal, just like I'm teaching now. But then somehow or other, you've got to be able to see it or feel it. Here's another example of how it can be done. You just put a couple of electrodes on your skin and let them pick up the tension of the muscle underlying that skin, and you can watch it on a little oscilloscope, and that's the kind of feedback that really helps a lot. And that machine that you just mentioned, John, I forgot what you call it that you have in your gym.
The Tendo unit.
Yeah, the Tendo unit. They work pretty well too.
No, it was, we actually set it up in two ways. The first time when we set it up for the girls, it was facing us. And then when Luke and I got in there and squatted, we actually turned it to where you could see it. So you'd complete a rep, and we could look immediately at the machine and know whether or not you were, hitting the parameters we want. And we were measuring like meters per second. We were measuring the force on the bar and the wattage and all that. Yep. And that became like an instant feedback, loop where you execute the rep and you look right at the machine and you can tell based on that number, did I do what I needed to do? And then it was like, hey, you know what? We're going to need to speed it up. I need you to get out of there faster. And all of a sudden, this sense of urgency really kind of blossomed. And, to the point where, the first rep was pretty good. The second rep was pretty good. Then the third one was, and then fourth was like, and then all of a sudden you're in that last mindset. We were doing fives. That last rep, like, I got to pick this thing up. And it was always the last rep was always the fastest rep.
Let me tell you what the greatest feedback mechanism of all is for any athlete in any sport. It's the roar of the crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
and that brings it down to, our philosophy in terms of we get, and I'm sure, Doc, as you have through your career, I mean, you have hundreds and thousands of people asking you these questions about training, forgetting, and whether or not they're even coaches. And, at our seminar, we're making a point to say that it's performance-based, and, the numbers count, but the only numbers that really count is, the score at the end of the game or your win-loss record. Don't get so hung up on trying to improve your one-arm squat or your mile time that you forget how to play your sport. You forget what it's all about.
I agree. Listen, if you have a team of athletes who have taken personal responsibility for their respective roles in the game and have prepared themselves with compensatory acceleration and other techniques as finely as possible, and if they have the passion to win and the passion to just forget about everything around them, what you're going to end up with is a team that will never lose, because winning will become a foregone conclusion.
Well, I mean, the biggest difference I noticed as an NFL player between the good and the great was confidence. I mean, you talked about fear, and as you're, squatting, eccentrically loading 1,000 pounds to the hole and then driving out. I mean, if there's any doubt or any fear in your mind or any, shadow of a doubt that you can't execute the lift, you're probably either going to fail or you're going to hurt something. And
or you're going to go so slow that it won't matter,
Yeah, you'll just take it for a ride, and somebody's got to help you back up with it. But I mean, we saw the same thing in the NFL. The guys that walked into the game that had doubt and had fear, it's like they all, their worst fears were going to come true. And I've told the story a few times of a guy I played with, and we were going out to play in a playoff game, and he was a backup. The starter got hurt, and he, all of a sudden had to get into a starting role. And the guy he was going against was one of the best in the NFL. And I remember we practiced all week. We watched film. Everything seemed to be pretty good. And before we were about to run over on kickoff or run out the tunnel for introductions, he turns and looks at me and goes, how good could Dwight Freeney really be? He's just a man, right? I mean, like, how good could he really be? And I remember looking at him, and like the look in his eyes, I just took like a big step back, and I was like, oh God. And all of a sudden he, and it was true. I mean, all of a sudden those fears and those doubts that he had in that moment became reality the first snap of the game and every other play that we lined up in that game. And I remember later on and, trying to talk to him and being like, dude, even if you're going to go out there, the last thing you need to do is believe that you're going to get your ass kicked. Like, you got to go out there and believe that you're going to, play the game of your life. And this is going to be the difference in your life is the good to the great. So it's self-doubt's killed more people than cancer. So I mean, it's
that's right. I will tell you again that passion is the greatest contributor to improving your outlook and your motivation and your self-confidence. Let me just tell you a little bit about passion so that your listeners will fully understand where we're coming from here. I delivered this particular talk, and it'll only take a minute, to the Kansas City Chiefs about 25 or 30 years ago, when right before they had a game with the LA Raiders, and it so stoked them up, man. After the game, the guys are coming up to me and saying, "Man, you got to write that down. I never heard anything like that," because it so motivated them. And here's what it is: passion. It's not commitment to excellence, rather utter disdain for anything less. Not endless hours of practice, perfect practice. Not ability to cope, rather the total domination of every situation in life. Not setting goals. Goals too often prescribe performance limits. And it's not doing what it takes to win. Instead, it's a burning commitment to do what no one has ever done before or ever will do again. It's not the need to achieve. Instead, it's doing what it takes to exceed the bounds of mere convention. It's not the force of skill or muscle. It's the irrepressible, sometimes explosive force of will. Now, if you believe in and practice these things, then for you, winning is neither everything nor the only thing, as the great Vince Lombardi once said. If you believe in and practice these things, then for you, winning has become a foregone conclusion. But if along the way you somehow stumble, profit from the experience, then bow by the power of Almighty God, it'll never happen again. So there.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well,
Yeah. That's amazing. We're in tears.
Doc,
That's awesome.
The fact that you memorized that and still could put it out there is unbelievable. That's awesome. That's great.
Well, that is how I live my life.
That's how you got to where you were. I mean,
I
truly
believe
passionate about the work.
I believe it is.
Oh, that's amazing. How do we top that? What do we transition to?
I don't know. I
feel like
figured
an asshole right now.
I don't know.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask him was, when you squatted that 1,000 pounds, you were in your 40s, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I just turned 41.
Danny,
Right.
are you asking how to squat 1,000
Yeah.
pounds?
Yeah, I'm not asking how to squat 1,000 pounds, but I kind of feel like as I've gotten older, I've gotten better, like, performance. I've lifted more weight than I did when I was younger. It's just coming from a different background probably, but it's like I always want to continue to improve no matter how old I get. And there's always the naysayers around you that are kind of like, well, eventually this is going to happen and eventually that's going to happen. And it's like, I don't accept that. I just want to keep improving, keep getting stronger and faster. And, I believe that it's the passion that I have within myself that kind of helps me pursue that goal / dream. I guess what I'm asking is, here it took you to do that in your 40s. I mean, could you have done that in your 20s, or is it just the way things happened, or, what's your take on that?
Okay, I'll tell you what it is. I spent an awful lot of time in other sports before I settled into powerlifting. The very first thing that I was an Olympic weightlifter and a gymnast. And before that, by the way, I was a farmer. I baled hay when I was a kid. All through my childhood, I worked my fool head off, throwing bales of hay up in the back of a truck and stuff like that, I was a pretty strong kid. And then I got into gymnastics, and I was in love with gymnastics, and I spent almost 20 years of my life doing gymnastics, trying to make an Olympic team there. And I went to the national championships 4 years in gymnastics. And then I graduated from college and went through graduate school. And I started falling in love with Olympic weightlifting more. And so I went back to that, my first sport. And in the intervening years of high school and college, I did track and field. I played soccer. I even played basketball. I was a third stringer on a college basketball team. So I mean, I went around the horn, as they say in sports. But so in other words, I didn't get into powerlifting until I was almost well into my 30s, almost 40. And I believe that if powerlifting were a sport back when I was younger, and it wasn't, powerlifting didn't come into being until the mid 60s and early 70s. But if I were in powerlifting in my early days, I surely wouldn't have taken any longer than I did, maybe even less time, because I was less worn out, fewer injuries and so forth. And so it's not that it took me into my 40s to make it. It's just that I didn't get started until I was nearly 40.
Okay, and but you were still able to do this great feat, this great feat of strength in your 40s. So, yeah. I mean, it's there's still improvement that can be made with an athlete in his 40s, possibly into his 50s.
Yeah. In fact, I was getting stronger when I finally made the decision to quit. And there was a very practical reason. I wanted to spend more time with my kids. I lived, ate, slept, and breathed what I was doing. I was a priest to what I did, literally a priest. You look up the word priest in the dictionary, you'll see that's what I was. And a different time came upon me. I began to realize that I was a family man and I had other responsibilities, and I had a bunch of kids that I had to teach and be an example to, and all of that kind of stuff. Plus, I was in a very demanding job that took me all over the world, so I just I had to back away, and I had no regrets backing away, because when I did quit, I was starting to get nagging little injuries, and I knew that well into my 40s, nearly late 40s, I was going to hurt myself, and in my old age, I would suffer the consequences of that kind of damaging injury. So I quit at the right time, I believe. And, there's an old saying, too. Confucius says, he who climbs a mountain the first time climbs it because it's there. He climbs it a second time just to prove that the first time wasn't a fluke. But shame on he who tries to climb the mountain 3 times. So I had done what I wanted to do. I went over 1,000 pounds. I was actually kissing 1,100 at the time I quit. So it was just time to quit.
So Doc, what do your kids do? Are they in athletics or sports or any performance components like you were in?
Yeah. My older son Freddie went into powerlifting. He was actually a pretty good powerlifter. At 165, he was squatting well over 500. And my daughter Disa did the same thing. She made the U.S. team and came in 3rd in the world and stuff like that. So she was actually an accomplished powerlifter. And but now he's got his master's degree and teaches up in Maryland, and she's got her doctorate and teaches exercise physiology at the University of Rhode Island. So they're doing fine. They're all grown up now.
And you passed along all the necessary knowledge, huh, to get them going in their journey.
Well, now she teaches me.
But Denny, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, we do have a few questions from the forums.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, one of our followers, Little Sean, he's interested in your opinions on some of the other programs that are out there. He wrote in saying, I've seen a lot of people try to adapt various strength programs into CrossFit training. Examples would be trying to incorporate the West Side program into CrossFit, or Catalyst Athletics, or the Small Off program. He's interested in your opinions of those programs, including your own, and can or should they be adapted for other uses?
All right.
Real quick before you get going, Doc, are you familiar with a lot of the stuff that Denny was pushing out there? Are you familiar with those programs?
Yeah. Okay. So Catalyst is you obviously know, West Side, which is the dynamic max effort and Louis Simmons stuff. And then Catalyst is a pure Olympic weightlifting. And then the other one is Small Off is just basically like a insane Russian volume squat program. So what he's asking for is, it's kind of it's an interesting question, but what he's really looking for is how, the secret squirrel program, like incorporating strength training into something like CrossFit, which is, the idea of, fitness as it defined by CrossFit.
I understand. First of all, you have to understand that CrossFit is not a method of training. It's a method or a conditioning for a sport. It's a method it's a lifestyle of fitness type stuff. And quite frankly, I've got a lot of problems with that because, in all the world of training, well, I don't care what kind of a training program, whether it's Louis Simmons or Greg Glassman with CrossFit or any of the other guys or gals that are doing stuff out there like this, there are laws that have to be adhered to. When you go out on the road, you have to abide by the laws of the road. When you're amongst other people, you have to abide by the laws of your society and so forth. And if you don't, you suffer the consequences. You get hurt, you get thrown in jail, whatever have you. Well, lifting and training has certain laws. And, I used to read about these laws every once in a while. I'm going back 50 years now. I'd read something in the old Iron Man magazine or Strength and Health or one of the other magazines, and I'd say, well, that sounds really good. And this guy's calling it a law or a basic principle. So over the course of years of time, I put together all of those laws of training, and I smoothed them out, and I worked with them, and I came up with a list of 7 granddaddy laws. These laws, the 7 granddaddy laws, must never be broken, regardless of the training methodology that you're using. All right, and CrossFit breaks almost all of them. Let me just go through the list real quick. Just real quick, okay? Principle of individual differences. Obviously, CrossFit doesn't adhere to that because everybody's doing the same thing, the WOD, workout of the day. Principle of overcompensation and the principle of overload. Well, CrossFit does that a little bit because you do make gains. You get bigger, you get stronger, you get more enduring, whatever have you. So there's an amount of adherence to those 2 laws, overcompensation and overload. The SAID principle, specific adaptation to impose demands. Well, you're imposing so many different demands on the body that it can't compensate to any full amount. So they're breaking that principle. The disuse principle. All they're doing is overtraining over and over and over again. And the workouts are random. And you can't lose what you don't use. It's as simple as that. The specificity principle is being violated with CrossFit because training works like a funnel. You have to understand it. You go from general training to specific training. From one day of workout of the day, there is no pretense of any sort of foundational training in CrossFit. There's no foundation. There's no nothing. You just go right into trying to do kip-ups on the still rings or snatches for 30 reps, for crying out loud. That's just outrageous and insane. And then there's the general adaptation principle, GAS. They call it the gas law, okay? all of the CrossFit workouts, you are required to go at them with 100% intensity. There's no back off periods. There's no compensation or overcompensation period or recovery period. You're going balls to the wall all the time, and it's crazy. And there are so many people getting hurt with CrossFit that it's really bothersome to me personally, and it's bothersome. In fact, CrossFit was just recently sued, or not sued, but raked over the coals by the National Strength and Conditioning Association people, and they in turn CrossFit sued them for defamation of character. And it's very interesting watching this lawsuit unfold. But basically, there are way too many people getting injured in CrossFit, and it's a shame because I love CrossFit. When I was a kid, I told you I was a gymnast, and I loved all of the various things that the people do in CrossFit. I did all of that stuff every day or every other day as a kid playing. I was able to do a flag on a pole. I could do a kip up on the high bar or the still rings at any time. I could do a handstand. I could walk a half a mile on my hands. And that was all play for me. But you can't ask 40-year-old Mrs. Jones, who's obese and detrained from a lifetime of slovenly living, to do that kind of stuff. Yet they're being required to do the WOD. And it's just crazy. It's insane.
Yeah, Doc, but I mean, let's say you bring somebody in, obviously somebody that's deconditioned, like a 40-year-old, and you bring them in and scale it in such a way. I mean, I've seen people that were detrained and weren't necessarily athletes or didn't have an athletic background come in and, maybe just working on a basic pull-up or even these basic foundational movements. And I think, I owned a CrossFit gym for a number of years, and just bringing people in and teaching them just basic strength and conditioning, just getting them to run better, move better. I mean, it's paid a lot of good dividends. I think,
That's a good thing. But now we're not talking about CrossFit. We're talking about delving out of the CrossFit mold of the WOD and the so-called they got different names for different kinds of workout programs. They got things they call what do you call them? I got a couple of them listed here. Hang on one second.
Yeah, and really what it's all about, though, Doc, and is really the training goal. And that's one thing that we're talking about here is our training goal, and what we're trying to do is reinforce the concept that speed kills. And that's what the 7 laws of your training are all about, is being able to generate maximal force, maximal power production for an environment where the demands of your sport don't last but a microsecond, versus
that's right.
The adaptation that you're going to get from these extended efforts would be your inability to potentially hit that, but you get a lot better at that general work capacity, which is the objective. So whenever we get posed with this question, what's better, what's worse, we always say, hey, well, what are you training for? So I guess if you had some athletes that came to you and were like, hey, I want to be really good at CrossFit, which is broad, general, inclusive, everything that you can do. And let's say they were physiologically capable in terms of, healthy younger athletes that could perform at that level, then you probably would have them doing submaximal loads to get better at lifting submaximal loads, even though it violates the 7 principles that we're really big advocates of, because maximal power output is our objective, in terms of building that power athlete.
Yeah. But see, in CrossFit, they've got these workouts. I'm sitting here looking at a list of some of them. The Barbara, 5 circuits of 20 pull-ups, 30 push-ups, 40 sit-ups, 50 bodyweight only squats performed in order, while only resting at the end of each circuit for a 3-minute period, and then you do it again 5 times. The Angie, 100 pull-ups, push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 bodyweight only squats, and the Murph, a 1-mile run, followed by 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 3 bodyweight squats, finish off by another 1-mile run. The Jackie, 1,000-meter row, thrusters, 50 squat thrusts, with a selected weight, 30 pull-ups, and so forth. Well, see, these are prescriptions that people have to do, regardless of what their objectives are. Fat Mrs. Jones comes into the gym wanting to fit into a size 5 dress. This is not the kind of workout that you put her through.
Yeah, but she can probably get into that size 5 dress at the end of it. But I mean, hey, Doc, so think about this, right?
Yeah.
You were a high-level gymnast and a sprinter, so you obviously have a background, super strong powerlifting, this whole deal. I gotta believe that if this was present day and you were in your 20s, you would be competing in the CrossFit Games.
Was that a question for me?
No, it's a statement. I believe it. And am I right or wrong? I mean, with a gymnastics background and what you've seen of it, I like to believe that you would have excelled at this sport.
CrossFit?
Yeah.
Oh, I would have been the world champion in CrossFit.
So that's what I was getting at. I was like, you are like the prototypical for, when CrossFit starts talking about, like what does, like what would they expect out of the person who is their champion? It's usually like, if you look at Greg Glassman's deal, was usually like a fairly adept gymnast as a kid, a track runner, Olympic weightlifter, and I've heard this analogy or this prescription given. We're talking about like, hey, this is the person we would expect to be a kind of a CrossFit Games winner. As you were going through it, I'm like, you grew up baling hay, you were a gymnast, you were a sprinter, and you were an Olympic weightlifter and a powerlifter. I'm like, Doc, I think you were born later in life. You probably would have been the CrossFit Games winner.
Not too late.
Yeah, I love CrossFit. Don't get me wrong. I love all of that stuff. And none of these things in my youth would have been a challenge for me at all. I could have pulled it off, no trouble. But see, I'm not an average person. I'm not a person out there looking to get fit. And in fact, I'm not even an average athlete. Most athletes never achieve the kind of overall fitness that I was able to achieve.
So on that thread, this is going to be kind of a shift, but one of the things that we're working with and we get peppered with in terms of, let's say, the average athlete or the amateur athlete, because the majority of the coaches we work with, they deal with the bell curve, which is really the average. In terms of the plyometrics training and its importance in a lot of this power development, how would you take an athlete who maybe has we'll call it traditional coaching in a field sport, which is these guys just get conditioned, right? You run laps, you run miles, wind sprints, things like that. Nothing really well thought out in our experience in terms of a strength program. They're following just basically a bodybuilding circuit. If a kid came to you, let's say he's a 16, 18-year-old kid, plays football, basketball, baseball, and you wanted to start that athlete on plyometrics, how would you scale that accordingly?
I would not start them on plyometrics.
Okay.
You have to reach a certain level of limit strength, being able to handle your own body weight before you even think about doing plyometric training, because plyometric training in its purest form is very, very stressful. So no, I wouldn't begin them with plyometrics.
Which point would you really get the plyos in? I mean, I know, if you read Zadiskorski's work, he talks about 2 times body weight back squat being the beginning for depth jumps and for really the high intensity.
Yeah, stuff like that, sure. Well, I would incorporate, a little bit of really gentle jumping, hopping, and skipping early on to get them used to the idea of coming off the ground with a little bit of checkpoint or check mark intensity, but only a little bit, holding them back, maybe having them do some of them up a mild hill, a slight incline, for example, just to purposely slow them down, or have them do it with a weighted vest on him so that he couldn't possibly do it with explosiveness. But eventually,
so you're actually limiting the explosiveness in the early phases of this plyometrics, I guess.
As I said, is that transition, the amortization phase of going down to up. That's when people get hurt. And plyometrics is designed to optimize that transitional zone, going from down to up. That's what it's for. That's what plyometrics does beautifully well. Getting your body to all of a sudden stop and reverse direction is what plyometrics is all about, and it's very dangerous. So you have to work into it slowly.
Mm-hmm. Doc, when you were a young gymnast, and something like I don't know, how old were you when you started doing training hard in gymnastics?
I was just out of the Marine Corps and a freshman in college.
So you were 18 years old as you got into it.
I was 22 years old.
Oh, you were 22. So as you got into gymnastics, had you already had a decent strength training base? I mean, you said you were already pretty strong from training on the farm.
Oh, yeah.
And being in the Marines.
Yeah, being on a farm, and I was an Olympic weightlifter before that. And all through the Marine Corps, I mean, I even played football in the Marine Corps. I did everything I could do to stay in shape. Most of the guys that I was in the Marine Corps with got themselves horribly out of shape.
Sure. Well, so when you got into the started your gymnastics training, you were already pretty strong. So when you start looking at dynamic movement, like a floor routine, which if for anybody that's ever seen gymnastics do floor routine, it just looks. I mean, the eccentric load followed by being able to tie movements together is really that's all about.
Yeah.
That's plyometric training at its most advanced.
I agree.
So when
I was definitely more ready than the average person at that age. Definitely, just from a lifetime of lifting and stuff like that.
Cool. So then I guess after they build that bodyweight competency, that's when you would start to again slowly and carefully introduce that stuff.
Yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
That's what, but not before.
So I got another question from our coach Tex, who had to drop off the line. He said he's getting a quote from A Fresh Look at Strength, and he says he's quoting it. Understand that simply working limit strength is not the way for an athlete to become great. In fact, it slows you down if carried to the extreme.
That's all you're doing.
And that's what we observe in current training protocols is that coaches tend to chase that limit strength. And what Tex was curious is, did you observe a shift in mindset of field sport strength and conditioning? When did you observe that when they started to fall in love with the numbers and they started chasing numbers?
Okay. This goes all the way back to the very beginning of my experience in fitness, all the way back into the mid-50s. Coaches were saying that they didn't want their athletes to lift weights because it would slow them down, it would make them more muscle bound, and they would lose their touch and stuff like that. And so I began to listen to them, and I'm saying to myself, that's not my experience. I feel like I'm a better athlete from what little lifting I had done by the time I was a teenager. And so over the course of years of time, it became very clear to me why those
Doc, you there? I don't know if maybe you muted something or unplugged something. Are you there?
I'm here.
All right, now we got you loud and clear. So for some, I'm not sure why, but it cut out that over the course of time, you noticed you were noticing something. So go ahead.
Yeah, over the course of time, it became very clear to me that the coaches weren't wrong. They were right, because lifting heavy weights will indeed slow an athlete down. If they're taught to lift the weight slowly, they're going to be slow on a field, and they're not going to be able to explode with compensatory acceleration because they never did it in the gym. So the whole idea is to take them out of their Volkswagen body and put them into a Maserati. Now, if you do that right off the bat, they're going to try to drive that Maserati just like they used to drive the Volkswagen, and it won't be any advantage to them to have the Maserati. So there's got to be a period of accommodation, a period of transition where their skills are kept intact while their body is changing, while their body is becoming stronger and bigger and so forth. Their skill has to be accomplished with that bigger and stronger body in such a way that their skill is enhanced, not held back. So there's an accommodation principle that I would add to the 7 granddaddy laws, that one more principle of accommodation for athletes, that as your body changes, you've got to change your skills to match.
So would you foresee, I guess, a shift in mindset, and what do you think it would take for a shift in mindset for a lot of the we'll call them old school strength coaches who are after that maximum strength, to pay more attention to bar speed and the approach that you really take, or are the kids can the kids that are playing sports now, can they not trust their coaches and they have to come to the more progressive thinkers like
I think those kids have to shy away from their old school coaches as much as they possibly can get away with, and go visit somebody that knows what they're doing.
Right.
Well, if somebody trains with compensatory acceleration, they're focusing on bar speed. I mean, in our conversation, you told me that before you squatted that 1,014, you didn't take over 800 in training. But
No.
when you hooked up that torquemeter or whatever, figured it out, you were exerting like 1,400 pounds of force on the bar.
That's
So it had been something where you'd never taken that 1,000-pound squat, and then all of a sudden, you're training at such a high level. You go in and you probably were in the warm-up room and started just blasting the weights up, and you're like, you know what, I'm going for this 1,014 today. Was that kind of how it played out?
That's pretty much it. I mean, I was a little bit more methodical than that, but you're right. I mean, it came upon me sort of like a thief in the night, so to speak. I finally got to the point where I was doing that 850 pounds with such tremendous force that I knew that I could go well over 1,000. I just knew it, and I did.
Yeah.
And the other key thing that Doc and I talked about, which has kind of been forgotten about in strength training circles, was he was doing progressive overloads where you were doing walkouts with, you told me 1,300 pounds and just doing static holds with the weight.
Yes. The static holds are very important because, if all I ever did was the 800-pound squats and then walked out of the rack with 1,000 pounds on my back, my nervous system would shut down. I wouldn't know what to do with that kind of stress on my skeletal structure. And all of the proprioceptors would say, wait a minute, you can't lift this, Fred. You've never lifted this before. So I would walk out and do static holds, what we call overloads, with 120% of what I thought my existing max was. So I'd go out with sometimes 1,200, 1,300 pounds and just hold it. That way, when I got to the comp, and I only have to do this 3 or 4 times prior to the meet. And then when I walk out with 1,000 pounds on my back, it feels like a walk in the park.
So when you did the static deal, I mean, you literally would take it out of the rack, walk it out, because obviously there wasn't a monolith back then. And how long would you hold it for?
Just a count of 10.
To a count of 10, and then you put it back in, and then how would you do multiple sets or just do it once, or how would it work?
I do a couple of 3 sets at the very most, usually only 2.
Wow. And always at the end of your squat workout, like obviously you got done maybe, doing triples or something at 850, and then, you were done with your work and you're like, okay, let's load it up and let's do some, progressive overloading deal and some static holds.
That's exactly right. And only for the last 3 weeks. In fact, the last week of training, I did no training at all. I just did 1 set of overloads.
Wow. Why do you think people it's not commonplace anymore? Like people don't really seem to do it. I remember, early in my life when we were pretty young, I remember going and we went to some high school deal where it was like a max bench at like 185. And I remember going in and them having us just hold like 225, 275, just for some static holds before we went to do the 185. And everybody seemed to do pretty well. And then it seems to be something that people don't necessarily really talk about, is that where that, all of a sudden the smarter we get, the things we forget about, almost the dumber we get.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I know it's good. It's something that, that just not a lot of people talk about anymore. But, in terms of overloading that nervous system and getting that body to fire and just being able to, teach the body, hey, this is what this load's going to feel like. And then all of a sudden you go into it. It's that idea that, and the other key one is it seems like in powerlifting, like most things, people go in and they end up hitting the numbers that they hit in the gym. I mean, it sounds like, you were in there, able to hit some, 150 plus pounds over what your best gym lift was. So, I mean,
always. And I learned that, by the way, very early in my career, and then it was fortified even more so when I traveled to the Soviet Union and trained under Yuri Verkhoshansky for a little while, and I went to a lot of his seminars, so forth. I found out that all of the great Olympic weightlifters in Russia did that exact same thing. They would go up to maybe 90% or 92% of max during their training, and then they'd add anywhere from 8 to 10% onto their max during the competition. and succeed every single time. Whereas the Americans were going to max all the time, and they'd rarely even make their max at the competition. It was stupid.
Well, what about like a Bulgarian system where the Bulgarian lifters were working up to a 1RM? I mean, that's kind of, if you look at that Bulgarian system, I mean, that pretty much breaks every single one of your 7 laws, unless it's specificity of movement.
And I mean, I can't answer that because I'm not real well versed on what the Bulgarians actually did. I hear a lot about Bulgarian training systems and guys writing this stuff down. For example, I think Tom Platz many years ago wrote down a Bulgarian training system, and the reason that he wrote it down was because somebody paid him to do it. And it became a very popular training system. The truth of the matter was that that's not how the Bulgarians trained. They trained under the Soviet system. I don't believe anything I hear when I hear Bulgarian training. And by the way, how are the Bulgarians doing these days?
I don't know. Are they even a country anymore?
So, all I can say is, no, I'm one of those show me kind of guys. I want to see it with my own eyes, and I happen to know the genesis of the Bulgarian training system was a training program that some guy had put together and asked Tom Platz to put his name to. And I don't believe that the Bulgarians ever trained the way that article said they did.
Yeah, we're going to have to go back and find it. I had the opportunity to read a bunch of information and communicate with Abajev, who was the Bulgarian coach, and ended up, trading some emails with those guys. And he went and did a pretty interesting strength conditioning lecture and put out some programs, and one of them was for a football player, and we ended up using it, and it was all based on working up to a 1RM and a squat, a press, and a pull every single day, and then doing some drop sets.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was a pretty interesting program in that, their whole deal was, you work up to a 1RM as long as the weight is fast. If the weight gets slow and grindy, you went too heavy. So every one of those 1RMs was like,
well, that's the answer right there.
Yeah, so they were training off of not a competition max, but training off of like a training max where, they knew that they were 10% better in competition. So then everything was based off of 90. And then they were working up to, let's say 90% of their 90, which was really 80 in the Russian system. And then basically doing that PAP deal where it's like I'm working up to something heavy, and then I'm going to drop and do some drop sets.
Well, I lost my case.
Yeah, that training program, paid some really good dividends for the guys that were doing it. I mean, everybody got pretty strong pretty quick. And I think what it really came down to was just specificity of movement, that, to get good at something, you have to do it
over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, if you're coming in and you're squatting every single day, you get really good at squatting. And it's that whole greasing the groove, mentality. I think you wrote something on it about Pavel's deal about greasing the groove. And, I'm a firm believer that if you want to get good at something, you have to do it over and over again. That I just never accidentally got good at anything. I needed a lot of opportunities to do it and replicate it.
I used to hang out with a guy, an Olympic weightlifter by the name of Dave Shepard. I don't know if you remember that name. He was one of the great Olympic weightlifters back in the 50s. Well, I hung out with him a lot, and you couldn't have a conversation with this guy ever. Walking down the street in New York City, he would all of a sudden start doing snatch movements in the middle of the street. And he said, I gotta do a few of these. Hang on a minute, and he'd give me about 8 or 10 snatch movements, and then we'd continue our conversation. And and he just absolutely believed that you had to grease the groove. So, but he did it without any weight on the bar. There was no bar, just him.
Well, I mean, let the greatest athletes do it. I mean, I played with Tony Gonzalez, who, played 17 years in the NFL and is probably one of the best players to ever play the game. And, from Tony and I went to college together, and I've known him for years. And, before every practice, he'd catch 200 balls. And after every practice, he'd catch his balls. And it was one of those deals where, young guys would come in and they'd see him out there doing this. And they'd be like, wow, this guy's already been a 10-year-old pro. Why is he working so hard?
Yeah.
And I remember remember him being like, well, you know what? This is what I did when I was young. This is what I need to do to get better. And I'm always trying to get better. And he never looked at it like, hey, I'm at this point. He always looked at it like, hey, I'm trying to constantly get better. And as a result, I mean, his work ethic was just unbelievable. And, never realizing that, like it just wasn't an accident that he was able to play at this high level and stay healthy and do all these things that he was for so long. I mean,
I believe in that. I believe that's probably a pretty good way to approach it. But, you got to recognize that catching a ball is not all that stressful on the body. So he was able to do it without having to pay any dire price.
Sure. Yeah, getting underneath 1,000 pounds and squatting it is probably a little more stressful than catching a football.
It's not the same. Over the years, I've trained a lot of pro football players, John, and a little bit before your time, actually. I'm the one who orchestrated Lyle Alzado's comeback into the NFL. I don't know if you remember those days.
Well, Lyle Alzado used to live in Palos Verdes, where I'm from. And
I know.
He actually tried to run my brother and I down. We were riding our bikes on the road, and this guy, I swear to God, black Rolls Royce comes out of nowhere and tries to run my brother down. And it was Lyle Alzado, and we were like, it was one of those deals where like Lyle Alzado almost killed us, but dude, Lyle Alzado almost killed us.
He was a wild man.
Yeah, no, he tried to run down some like 10-year-old kids on their bikes, so he's a crazy person. But
he picked you.
Yeah, but he picked us.
He could have picked any two kids.
Then, like about 6 months later, we were at the beach and we saw him walking on the Strand, in Redondo Beach. And to this day, I've never seen a bigger human being. Yeah. His chest was so big that you could have like put a Coke can on the top of it, and he could have walked. It was unbelievable how big that dude was.
So that's what Doc did for him, huh?
Yeah, Doc. Yeah. Oh yeah, his comeback. But Doc,
he got hurt.
What were your other numbers? Like, what was your best bench? What was your best deadlift? What was your best total?
Okay, I had rotator cuff repairs on both my shoulders, and I was still able to pull out a 550 bench, and I deadlifted eight and a quarter.
Wow. So what was that total? What would that be? I'd have to tally it up.
I never added up the numbers.
So that would have been 1,014 plus 550, and then what did you say, 8 and a quarter?
Yeah.
That's 2389. It's just under 2,400. That's for the old school marathon single ply suit and those wraps. I mean, that's a pretty solid total. I mean, compared now, now they got 3 meter long wraps and.
I know. Hey, I had the occasion just last Sunday to pick up a pair of the wraps that the guys are wearing nowadays. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe I was barely able to stretch that wrap out.
Yeah.
And it was so heavy and so long. I'm saying to myself, if I had this wrap, I would have squat 200 pounds more than I did.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, think about like the multiply stuff. I mean, the canvas suits and the multiply briefs. I mean, just the stopping power.
It's turned into a circus sideshow now. It's not even a sport anymore, and I'm so embarrassed over the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, but there's been a huge resurgence in the last couple of years into raw lifting, and now it's almost made it. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like the multiply stuff is, it's pretty hot, but it's becomes just so laborious to be able to have to get in all that gear. I mean, now it's like that's why I think the raw stuff's really taken out because people just want to go in there and lift weights and not have to.
I see that happening.
Yes, we've seen it.
Return to our roots, and it makes me happy, very happy. And
Doc,
nowadays there are more raw lifters than there are gear lifters.
Yeah.
Doc, you seem like a pretty smart guy, and we're coming up to the time limit. But I was curious if your scientific approach to power and strength and bodybuilding, have you ever, or do you have on in the back of your mind a scientific approach or a scientific definition for athleticism?
Oh wow! Somebody asked me a question once, who the greatest athlete in the world is. And my instantaneous response was, in what sport?
Yeah.
You can't compare apples and oranges. Athleticism I told you, in all the world of sports, speed is king. So give me a movement and have each athlete try that movement fast, and we'll see which athlete is better at that particular movement. And every movement is just as different as every athlete, you know. So you're gonna have there's no way to define it finitely, other than to say, you know, the strongest and the fastest.
Right. So I mean, agreed that it's very task specific, but the universal trait of athleticism would be speed and quickness and strength, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what about like you could take the guy who wins the gold medal in the decathlon, for example, at the Olympics, and say, you know what, he can not only, I mean, those guys are running sub 11-second hundreds. They're running, you know, they're tossing the shot pretty far. I mean, they high jump. I mean, they do all these different movements. I mean, that could be.
All you can say about them is that they are very good at all of the events, but they're not great at any of them.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
And that's all you can say about those guys. And yeah, of course they're highly athletic, but are they the best athletes? No, not even remotely. They're only half-baked athletes in each one of those events.
Yeah. We just like to get input on that, because that's one of our big things is, you know, improving task-specific athleticism as opposed to a general approach to.
Yeah. I think it has to be a highly specific question.
Sure, a case-by-case basis, really, right?
Well, I mean, we've always kind of judged it. Like I've seen people that were, you know, very good football players, are very good at their sport, but yet couldn't do anything like, you know, whereas I've seen other guys that were, you know, good football players and could have played in the NBA and could have played Major League Baseball and had a whole, you know, their skill set could apply to many, many different things. And I think like, you know, the more things or the more tasks that you can execute with not only speed, power, but also grace, you know, beauty, you know, it looks good, I think, is really when I start defining athleticism.
I agree with you, John. You know, the more tasks you give an individual to compete at, you know, the sooner you're going to know his level of athleticism overall, in an overall sense. But you know, like your buddy who caught 200 passes a day, you know, you can't deny that his pass catching ability was as good or better than just about anybody alive. So, you know, you can't discount this guy.
Well, he also could have played in the NBA too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, he was, played college basketball and, you know, definitely could have been a small forward in the NBA. Yeah. And ended up going on and being a pretty good basketball player. So, you know, that's really when we start looking at how we not only train athletes, but define athletes and start really kind of challenging athletes. You almost have to like force them to, you know, get out in space and move and do a couple different things. It's almost like in the weight room, you can develop a certain capacity, certain strength, speed, all these key factors. But if you can't take what you learn in the weight room and then apply it out on the field or the pitch or the turf or the court or whatever it is, then, you know, it's kind of useless in a lot of ways. So,
yeah. I've on that same note, I've always kind of wondered how I ever got the nickname Dr. Squat, you know. Yeah, I was pretty good at squatting, but I could do a lot of other things really well. So I just wonder, how come they never called me Dr. Vertical Jump or Dr. Back Handspring or.
Well, I like that you didn't give yourself that nickname, that somebody else gave it to you. I thought all this time that you were just like, oh yeah, I'm a doctor, so I'm, you know, and I got a big squat, I'm Dr. Squat.
Yeah, one of my students gave me that name many years ago. So.
What was your highest vertical jump?
40 inches.
Wow.
That's good.
I could actually get above the rim, and I'm only 5'7", you know.
So was the vertical always there, or did the vertical develop over time?
Well, as I said, I played a little basketball, third string basketball, and back then I could touch the rim, but I couldn't get above it. And you know, the more I was able to squat, the higher my vertical got. So
there's a direct relation between your body's ability to generate force in a vertical plane and putting a heavy load on your back.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, no, I know we talk about it a lot, and but the other key factor becomes, and this is where we really started doing a lot of testing on people and started using the VertMac or the VertTech, is it's not how much weight you squat, it's how you squat the weight. You know, I mean, that idea where, hey, each, for my one RM limit RM, it takes me 20 seconds to go up and down, opposed to a guy that squats the same way and does it in 1 second.
Right. It's got to be done with compensatory acceleration.
Now, was compensatory acceleration something? I mean, did that come out of you and Verkhoshansky's talk? I mean, I remember you telling me that that was something that you had really kind of theorized and those guys kind of agreed with. Like, how did that whole thing come about?
That's exactly right. Verkhoshansky had gotten a hold of my book on power training, and he had it translated into Russian. And when I first got there, I was like greeted by him and a bunch of other Russian coaches as like a rock star because they liked my book. And that was one of the things that they really liked.
Wow. That's pretty good. Those guys are, pretty heady. So, anything else, Luke? We got anything else?
I believe that's it for the day. It's a long one. It's a good one. And so thanks a lot, Doc. We have a couple announcements on our end. You can hang around if you want, but I want to thank you again for coming on the show, giving us your time, and also thanks for your patience early on during some of the technical difficulties getting the thing up and running.
Yeah,
it's not a problem. I got the whole afternoon off.
Nice. What about tomorrow afternoon? Got that one off too?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
I'm going to be hitting you up for some private training stuff.
But so one thing, I guess, for our listeners, I just wanted to, we have breached the 5,000 likes barrier on our Facebook page.
Oh, yes.
So we got our 5,000 likes giveaway going on. If you want to be entered in for random drawing, we have a Toes Forward hashtag going on. Check out the Instagram page, and you'll get all the info there. You'll be selected or entered in for a random drawing for some hot, sexy Power Athlete merch.
Why are you looking at me?
Because I don't know, seeing if you have anything to say about that. But so yeah, that's our thing going on now. And then what else do we got going on?
Tomorrow we'll be making a video post for standards for the SWAD of the Power Athlete Team Series and a teaser for one of the other group team WADs. So pretty exciting. We're coming down to the wire, and I know people are anxious to see what the competition's all about. And this year is going to be a doozy.
I'm glad I'm running it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing all the video demos.
But Denny, you got anything for us?
We're good on my end, guys. I just want to take a second to say thanks for being on the show. Dr. Hatfield, it was awesome.
I love doing these. Call me anytime, folks.
We'll pick you up on that.
I did check out that, what do we talk about? Pal Talk? That is a pretty cool forum, and I'll pass that info to Luke. Luke's really the computer guy, so.
Yeah.
I think Pal Talk is just an ideal place to do a thing like this.
Yeah, we'll check it out. But,
all right, guys.
Great. Thank you, Doc. I appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Bye.